Welcome back to the Boropolis Podcast. It has been a while. We've had our break. We have seen England progress to the quarterfinals of the World Cup and then get knocked out, unfortunately, last night, Nathan. I don't want to dwell too much on it because, of course, this is a Middlesbrough podcast and actually a lot of positives to take from even the break. Of course, we had Riley McGree's performances at the World Cup and Australia's success. We've had members joining the coaching staff. And of course, I was about to say we've had one win. We've actually had two, theoretically. Of course, we beat Hibs in a friendly. But yeah, because we've been away for the sort of groups and the early knockout rounds of the World Cup, there's actually a fair bit to sort of chat about. So before we get delved into all of that sort of stuff, Nathan, how have you enjoyed a little break from the podcast and a little break from club football?
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Getting away from Borough for a little while, although it probably did come at a bad time, coming off the back of two wins away at Blackpool and Norwich. But yeah, it was good to watch England for a spell. Of course, there will be many people talking about last night's game and a fantastic refereeing performance, as all the EFL fans will be happy to comment on, having watched EFL referees every week. It was EFL standard refereeing.
It really was.
On the biggest stage, and yeah, England knocked out by France in the World Cup quarterfinals, but the day wasn't entirely ruined as Borough did return back to championship action yesterday afternoon, and the podcast has returned again for a very busy Christmas period. So yeah, there's plenty to get into, as you mentioned there, Chris, before we get into discussing Luton at home that happened yesterday. So let's just get right into it.
Let's do it. So starting point, I think we've got to go back to 2 weeks ago now, I think it was. Obviously, a trip to Scotland for Borough, mid-season friendly. I've got to be honest, it was one of them where I knew there was a friendly taking place. And up until about the day before, I thought, hang on, we're playing a football match. What? This is all in the midst of sort of being in World Cup fever and thinking that England were eventually going to do it, which is always a dangerous place to get yourself into. But yeah, it I don't want to say it took me by surprise, but it sort of just felt strange seeing Middlesbrough up against Hibs in the middle of December. Early December, I suppose. So yes, a lot of changes, Nathan. But some things like death and taxes just seem to always happen. And one of those things is Chuba Akpom scoring. I guess that was one of the big talking points from the friendly.
Yeah, he's inevitable, isn't he? Although that the game is a pretty non-event sort of game, it's just a game for the players to sort of gain and maintain their match fitness. Chuba scoring is always good to keep up the fantastic run that he's been going on at this current time. Sonny Finch getting on the score sheet as well, a young player that played a part in pre-season under Chris Wilder, also getting a run out along with some other young players. It's always good to bed those players into the first team. And yeah, a win, although it is a pretty non-event game, a win is always good to breed confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to be honest, although, some people listening or watching might be thinking, well, actually, we performed extremely well in the Hibs game. I don't think anyone really wants to hear us discuss it at length. I think it was a case of we won the game. It was a good run out, obviously a good chance for some youngsters to impress. And of course, the Tuba train having a slight surprise stop in Scotland is the main sort of talking point from that little piece of news, I guess. That's what it seemed to be in the middle of the World Cup. Anyway, another piece of news, Nathan, was that there was an addition to the coaching staff. Of course, Michael Carrick's backroom team, and that was the addition of Aaron Danks, recently of Aston Villa. In terms of a footballing CV as a coach, some really quite impressive previous clubs on his CV. And although it's not the sort of experienced head that I think most people thought that would inevitably get added to Michael Carrick's backroom team, still an impressive addition nonetheless.
Yeah, I hadn't really heard of Aaron Danks apart from a few months ago where he was a caretaker manager for an Aston Villa game against Brentford following the sacking of Steven Gerrard, and he managed that game. Okay, he may not have had a massive influence as to what went on, but Aston Villa did win that game 4-0 at home to Brentford. But in terms of Aaron Dank's CV, he's been in and around football coaching for 15 years now. Firstly at West Brom, then Birmingham, and then in the England youth systems with the under-20s and the under-21s. And then before heading to Aston Villa with Steven Gerrard, he was actually assistant to Vincent Kompany at Anderlecht, which I suppose is quite interesting, looking ahead to Burnley away next weekend. Aaron Danks in Borough's ranks. Excuse that little rhyme there. Yeah, having him involved with our coaching staff won't do any harm in hopefully unpicking Burnley next week. But yeah, 15 years experience as a coach, but in the flesh, looking at him, he doesn't look like that experienced head.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, just in terms of actually looking at him, it sounds daft, but I think when most people, talked about a bit of experience being added to the coaching staff, everyone sort of assumed it'd be someone coming into the club with a bit of grey hair, as silly as it sounds. And obviously that's not the case. But of course, as you mentioned, 15 years of experience, and it can only be a welcome addition to Michael Carrick's backroom team. And another piece of news, Nathan, on the topic of youth and on the topic of someone who was impressed massively since the arrival of Michael Carrick, Hayden Hackney, rewarded with a new contract, thoroughly deserved after his sort of emergence as almost one of the first names on the team sheet over the past few months. Obviously, it was Leo that gave him his opportunity, but he's managed to stay in there. And of course, we spoke, even going back to the last podcast before the World Cup had even started, about how impressive, his Norwich performance was. Obviously, he got his goal at Wigan away under Leo. And yeah, a lot of impressive performances. And him and Howson have been a breath of fresh air together in our midfield under Michael Carrick. So yeah, thoroughly deserved, I should say. And obviously that is until 2026. So a real piece of good news, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. It solidifies the future of our midfield and this team as well. Since coming into the side, I think Hackney's been fantastic. So comfortable on the ball, so comfortable under pressure. He seems to be so composed and always seems to make the right decision as well. To have a midfielder in there that gets the ball on the half turn and looks to play forward is always very important. And he's been playing really, really well in the past few weeks that we've seen him playing since coming into this Middlesbrough side. And I think Michael Carrick's a massive fan of him as well, featuring in every game so far under Carrick. So yeah, long may Hackney's form continue, and hopefully he'll be a mainstay in this Middlesbrough side for many years to come.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, also we did have 2 nominations for both manager and player of the month. And I think obviously, given that we would know that Carrick was the manager of the month nomination, there was only one player that was going to get nominated for the player section of those awards. Of course, Tuba up for the monthly awards. Unfortunately, neither Carrick or Akpom won. They were pipped by Mark Robbins and Victor Gyökeres from Coventry, which in fairness is, arguably justified. But I think, to be honest, Chuba Akpom's probably targeting bigger and better things than some sort of Tim Pot monthly award. He's looking at, next year's Ballon d'Or, isn't he? So I don't think he'll be too bothered by that at all. Obviously, after all of this, we returned to Championship football. The long-awaited return that's only actually been a couple of weeks, but it just feels like it's been forever since Middlesbrough played Championship football. Just talk first about how excited you were to just get back in the Riverside.
Yeah, I was. I was really looking forward to getting club football back, if I'm honest. Over the last few weeks, I have been missing club football despite the World Cup being on. So much so that I did take a away day visit last week to Shrewsbury Town with Lincoln City. It was a very, very damp and cold and turgid football away day, really. So not really too dissimilar to Borough at times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have been missing the club football and was buzzing that Borough were coming back. So yeah, to get back into the Riverside this weekend was always a bonus. Arrived early, pre-match pint. Thought, yeah, this is it today. The football's back. The real football's back. But did think that it was very strange that Borough were playing on the same day as England, and yeah, I'm glad that we're not quite in League One or League Two, and hopefully we'll never be in my lifetime, because I couldn't imagine playing during an international break. It just seems so weird.
Yeah, it really, really was a strange one yesterday, and it almost sort of worked in probably a lot of people's favour. I know it worked in mine, because obviously following the England game, of course, everyone felt deflated. And bearing in mind, I was actually out in Newcastle, everyone was sort of, they didn't have a club result to get behind or cheer them up a little bit, whereas it sort of took quite a lot of the actual disappointment away. The fact that I was just flicking through Twitter and looking through Middlesbrough tweets and thinking, well, actually, we may have been knocked out the World Cup, but Chuba Akpom scoring goals and the Borough back, it could be worse. And I know, of course, it was extremely disappointing. But yeah, it did sort of ease that blow a little bit. Instead of talking about the failings of England, and I mean, that could be a whole different podcast in itself, Nathan. Let's talk about the positive of the day. Of course, a 2-1 home win back at the Riverside. Team unchanged, of course. Luton, given that they lost their manager before the return of club football, it was always going to be a bit of a strange one anyway, because we were coming up against somewhat of a unknown quantity, I guess. Obviously with Robert Edwards as Luton team. I mean, what were you expecting? How did that sort of match up with what Luton actually put up against Middlesbrough, I guess?
I didn't really have any idea how Luton were going to come into the game, if I'm honest. We all know what Luton bring as a side, because we've seen it under Nathan Jones in the last few years in the Championship. They're a side that have been very impressive, considering their sort of transfer budget and their wage structure as well. They're a small club for this division, and they've overachieved massively in recent years. But they set up relatively similar to the way that they did under Jones, with the three at the back, wing backs. They make the midfield very compact with three midfielders in there. And up front, they are dangerous. Their better players are the ones that lead the line for them. Carlton Morris and Elijah Adebayo yesterday. Carlton Morris, a player that has done the business against Middlesbrough before, gave Dale Fry a torrid time at Oakwell earlier on in the year as he headed the line for Barnsley. on that particular occasion. But yeah, I wasn't really sure what Luton would bring. But yeah, I was hoping that we wouldn't really be focused on what they'd bring, and instead we'd be a lot more focused on what we were going to do in the game and how we were going to sort of impose ourselves on them instead.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's quite interesting that you say that because, that's somewhat being part of the argument with England and the fact that, sometimes we almost focus on what other teams can do to us rather than our strength. And that certainly seems to be something that I've noticed that's massively changed with Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough team. The fact that, we take the game to teams and, we've been saying it all season, even under Chris Wilder, we've got players to, put teams on the back foot. We saw that even very, very early on in the season. I'm talking back to the Sheffield United and West Brom games. And I feel like we lost a bit of that, to be honest, towards the back end of Chris Wilder's tenure. And it's just great to see that back, to be honest, and seeing us be a little bit fearless and sort of working with our strengths rather than sort of trying to plug our weaknesses almost. So let's talk about the game then, Nathan. Obviously it was Luton that took the lead, and it was almost a goal that was sort of conjured up out of nothing, really.
Yeah, it really was. Early on in the game, both sides were a bit hesitant to impose themselves on each other, really. It was very much a stalemate. And then out of nothing, Jordan Clark picks the ball up in midfield and, well, really impressively nutmegs Johnny Howson, sidesteps away from Hayden Hackney, and with his left foot fires a shot low to Stefan's right-hand side and into that near corner. And yeah, it's a fantastic finish, really. As you say, out of nothing, the goal comes, and really that goal did help Middlesbrough a little bit. It sparked the game into life. I felt the game was a bit dead in the early stages of the game. It sort of felt like both sides were facing a little bit of a hangover from the break, sort of thinking that it was almost friendly like in the early stages. But yeah, Luton take the lead and Borough pretty much immediately hit back with a goal from the man himself.
Yeah, the Tuba train back to his first stop, back to the Riverside. And delivering the goods again, of course. This goal takes him to joint top scorer in the league, which just even to say that out loud feels crazy considering the situation that we're in at the start of the season with Tuba Akpom. And I don't think out of a lot of good and bad times following Middlesbrough, as strange as it may sound, this whole Tuba Akpom redemption arc story sort of script that seems to be getting a new chapter every week is almost one of my favorite sort of storylines or narratives that I've ever had supporting Middlesbrough. And I know that people might be thinking, well, it's only Tuba Akpom, but it's just the fact that he's continuing and did so at the start to just work so hard for the team whilst also proving that he's actually a very, very technically gifted footballer, all whilst just knowing previously that, and I don't think it would be disrespectful to say that he sort of wasn't wanted, really, was he? And yeah, I just take great pleasure in the fact every time he scores, of course, the Tuba train has been born. And yeah, I think I said it in the last podcast. I just love the man to death, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, yourself and I at the start of the season were sort of making a joke about Tuba Akpom with the Tuba train and things like that being made up. And it's no longer a joke. and it just keeps on going, doesn't it? It just keeps on rolling on, and Tuba week on week keeps on adding to this Middlesbrough side. And the most impressive thing is he's top goal scorer in the league, and he's not even playing as a central striker. He's playing as a number 10. And yeah, his performances have been fantastic, as well as adding goals. And the goal itself was a fantastic goal. I really enjoyed watching us play for this goal. Stefan out to Giles, Giles to McGree. McGree flicks it round a player and drives forward. And McGree really impressed me yesterday. I think he's sort of thriving off the confidence that he's got, having played at the World Cup for Australia. He looked like our best player on the pitch yesterday, and he really, really did impress me. A man that has sort of gone from zero to hero for me in the last few weeks. Having watched him earlier on in the season, I didn't see what he offered, and under Michael Carrick, he seems to have been sort of reborn as a player that is contributing a lot to this team at this moment in time, and I've been really impressed with him. So in this goal, he flicks the ball past the player and drives into midfield. We switch it out to that right-hand side, try and create something down that right-hand side, and it doesn't really work. Smith drives inside, gives it to McGree, who's tucked in from that left-hand side, which creates the space for Giles down the left. McGree switches it out to Giles. Giles, with his wonderful left foot, crosses that ball onto Tuba's head, and he nods into the ground and into the back of the net. And with the weather yesterday as well being a bit icy and a bit cold and a bit damp, it's a hell of a knee slide from Tuba. I do love a knee slide, and would always make a case that a knee slide is up there as one of the best celebrations that you can have if done correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, Tuba gets us back level and gave us a chance of going into this second half of the game looking to come out with 3 points.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, I mean, perfect. Probably could have done with a little bit more rain, perhaps, for ideal knee slide conditions. But I mean, it was close, and as you say, it was up there. I can only remember Darragh Lenihan away at Hull getting close to that this season. Obviously, Paddy McNair previously sort of had the Paddy McNair knee slide almost trademarked by ourselves. And obviously, given that he's not at the team at the moment, he has lost ground in the race for the best knee slide. And Tuba has really put himself up there as a top contender. And just on Ryan Giles, I mean, as you say, it's almost becoming a perfect duo of McGree and Giles on the left, because, as you mentioned again, the fact that McGree can come inwards and allow Giles to bomb on just suits Giles down to the ground. And, you know, we brought him in as a wing back. I mean, I guess you'd still call him a wing back, even though he's not playing in, you know, a traditional wing back formation. But his quality, just high down the pitch, is... I honestly can't think of another player in the division where, you know, 8 or 9 times out of 10, if you get him in a position, you know that he's going to deliver a good chance, or at least a good delivery, even if it's cleared or headed away. It's going to be a dangerous ball into the box. And yeah, I mean, it's, again, I can think back over the years, and we haven't really been blessed with sort of crossing or set piece dead ball ability. And yeah, I mean, it is really such an asset down that left to have Ryan Giles in the team. And I mean, just whilst we're still on that topic, we've got to talk about the new videos that have been popping up on Middlesbrough's YouTube channel, the sort of like regional dialect videos. Don't know if you've seen them. I hope you have. But they are a real good laugh. And the duo of Dale Fry and Ryan Giles is a joy to watch, to be honest. I'm thinking that they need their own podcast, to be totally honest.
Yeah, they do. It's really good to see the club and the in-house media team creating these type videos. They're really enjoyable to watch. And also shout out to Owen Swift for his videos with Tuber Akpom and Johnny Howson most recently as well. They're really good to watch as well. And it's just nice to have an insight into the players and see what they're all about as people as well. Of course, we see what they're all about on the pitch, but it's nice to have that personal feel with the players as well. So yeah, credit to the in-house media team for things like this, because they are really good to watch and really good for the fans to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And just listening to Dale Fry try and work out words that he's not come into contact with before is just an absolute joy in itself. So yeah, just maybe just make that into a sort of series up until he either retires or leaves the club, because yeah, he's got moments of magic in him, Dale Fry, when he's put in front of a camera. On to the second half, Nathan, of course, of yesterday's game. Obviously, the big sort of talking point, and I guess something that changed the way in which the game was going, or at least acted in, as an advantage to us, is of course the red card, the second yellow for Amari Bell. He fouls Isaiah Jones, and I mean, you can't complain about either of the bookings, but obviously it gives us the advantage. And I thought we looked dangerous throughout, and it's not to say that we wouldn't have gone on and won the game had we have not had that one man advantage, but it certainly helped us out.
Yeah, it did. You're right. In the first half, of course, Amari Bell was booked for a foul on Jones, and in the second half, he is booked again for a foul on Jones. Alfie Doughty, their left wing back, was down injured, but he was slightly off the pitch. And I love the fact that we didn't feel the need to wait and be the nice guys all the time. And we just decided to play on. Tommy Smith takes the throw, Borough play on. Hayden Hackney gives it to Jones. Jones flicks it around the corner, and Jones is too quick to flick it round the corner for Amari Bell. Bell flies in, kicks Jones, second yellow, off you pop. And Borough have 20 minutes now to capitalise with an extra man advantage. And in the end, Borough do exactly that, exactly the same as we did at Norwich about a month ago, with a 91st minute winner, from the tree. And the big man pops up again with probably his second chance of the game. He had one with his left foot that he blazed over the bar a few minutes earlier, but a bit of redemption. He gets that goal and Borough win 2-1. The goal comes from a free kick off the left. Giles takes the free kick and it gets cleared away, recycled by Johnny Howson. Johnny Howson gives it to Hackney, his midfield partner in crime. Hackney puts a good ball into an area, and I can't quite work out from the footage if it comes from Dale Fry's head or if it comes from a Luton's head. But the ball breaks and Crooks does so well to sort of know that the ball is going to drop where it does, and he's there, right place, right time, and yeah, he slots home. And I thought that the keeper would saved it, if I'm honest. I thought Hovarth had got his hand to it and flicked it away, but he didn't have enough. The pace was just enough to get it over the line. Hovarth flicked it into the corner and Crooks wheeled away, and Borough had 3 points at home, a first win at the Riverside for Michael Carrick. So buzzing.
Yeah, That's the best way to describe it, isn't it? And just as you say there, Crooks, again, as he has done so many times, just finds himself in the right position at the right time. And I was just saying earlier, obviously, about Ryan Giles and the fact that we haven't had someone that delivers that much quality into the box for so long. But actually, until the introduction of Matt Crooks, obviously last season, I, I can't remember a midfielder having that knack and that instinct to go and get in the box and arrive late and just find himself in the right place in the right time for a very, very long time. And it's almost his sort of signature move, whether he's having a good game or a bad game or an indifferent game. You can almost guarantee whilst he's on the pitch that he'll get one opportunity. And in fairness, he seems to put a lot of those opportunities away. And it's quite interesting, actually, that his new sort of role, which I'm sure actually, which seems ironic because, he scored 2 late winners in 2 games. His role at the moment is only an impact sub. And of course, he'll want to be back starting games. But when we are after a goal and he can be pushed that little bit higher off a striker or even playing as almost like a number 9, really, he's just so effective.
He is. He pops up at the right place at the right time all the time. And the only thing that I would say about Middlesbrough at this moment in time is if you take Chuba Akpom and you take Matt Crooks out this team, I don't know where the goals would come from. That's the only sort of negative that I'd have at this moment in time. Chuba every week scores goals, assists, and without him, I'm not sure we'd be where we are at this moment in time. And of course, Crooks, as you say, it doesn't matter if he's playing well or if he's not playing as well as he usually does. He does seem to pop up quite regularly, but on the off chance that he doesn't pop up, then Borough are really struggling for goals, and that's the only negative that I'd sort of suggest at this moment in time, just because you just don't know if these players are going to hit a bad patch anytime soon. Touch wood that they don't, because things are going really well at this moment in time. And Borough have had 3 wins out of the last 3, but it's just something to bear in mind, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I did want to touch on actually, it's almost a little sort of pet peeve of my own. This talk of people almost seeing it as a negative that we're scoring late goals. I think it's the biggest nonsense statement in football, to be honest. As long as you're winning football matches, and ironically, again, I think Michael Carrick actually answered this question yesterday very well, and he said, well, we're really enjoying all the late winners at the moment, and we're just enjoying winning football matches. And the sort of narrative around, well, of course, I'm sure ideally in a dream world, Michael Carrick would like every game to be wrapped up after the 20th minute, but football just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. As long as we're winning football matches, I don't really think scoring late on or, anything like that can be almost turned into a negative. And that's my only pet peeve. It's not a massive one, but it's just, you know, just enjoy scoring late goals. We went through a little bit of a period doing it under Chris Wilder, didn't we? And obviously, we all know how that's turned out. And I was surprised to see the man himself pop up on some sort of like Sky YouTube channel this week. I thought he would have gone into hiding after some of his comments earlier on in the season. And not returned for at least a few years, but he's reared his head again. But let's not get drawn on that. But yes, just as I say, you've got to enjoy the late winners. You can't be worrying about if they'll dry up or if they'll if we won't win if we don't score them, because each different football match is very different in itself. So for me, just enjoy Crooksy and enjoy the tree popping up whenever he fancies.
Yeah, it is one that as a fan, I think that you do enjoy last minute winners. At times they can come as a slice of luck, like the ball has dropped down to Crooks yesterday, and he's got that second chance of the game where he's missed one, and he's had a chance to redeem himself, and he's done just that. And Borough get 3 points yesterday afternoon. And we've had unfortunate ones like at Watford earlier on in the season where a shot from Gaspar takes a massive deflection and finds its way to their striker Bayo in the 6-yard box unmarked by himself with an open net to shoot at. So they can come at any time. You need a slice of luck at times. And I think that Borough's performances in the last few weeks have probably deserved last minute winners, but you've just got to be wary and sort of, well, be aware that these last minute winners hopefully aren't papering over the cracks of performances, because at this moment in time, I don't believe that the performances are being papered over, because we are playing quite well at the moment, and we're probably deserving of winning yesterday and also winning at Norwich a few weeks ago. But as long as the performances keep coming in, it doesn't matter how you win games, whether it be a 3-0 rout or a scrappy goal off the tree in the last few minutes. It doesn't matter how you win them. 3 points is 3 points. And yeah, hopefully the players' confidence is boosted by wins in the last minute, because I'm sure that they were thriving off that last minute winner yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a really good point. I think where some concerns, and I can sort of see it a little bit, where some concerns may come from is if we were performing badly and then just nicking these wins last minute. But as you say, the performances have been there for the most part. And for me, and I think for every Middlesbrough fan, it's so clear to see the improvement and the changes already after such a short space of time that Michael Carrick's already made to this Middlesbrough team. So yeah, at the moment, I think it's just one of them where you've got to enjoy it, as I've already said. We haven't touched on Kieran Scott addressing the media, as sort of, I didn't want to just skip over it almost, even though it chronologically was sort of going backwards here. But obviously, we didn't ask the club ourselves, but we discussed on the podcast that pretty much we'd like some more transparency from the club around about the time where Chris Wilder left. We wanted to hear from people higher up. And then, of course, we got some words and some quotes, obviously, from Michael Carrick's first press conference. But then we also, last week, I want to say, got some interviews from the written media, and also got a club interview, and there was also an audio interview on BBC Tees with head of football Kieran Scott. Just in terms of standout quotes, really, again, I think the one that everyone sort of looks at and picks at is the fact that he's again mentioned, he feels like his job is starting now. And that's certainly interesting, because it just shows, and it is very telling, that actually Michael Carrick's role is as a head coach and not as a manager, where, I think that's probably where some of the disagreements come from earlier on in the season, that Chris Wilder wanted to be too much of a manager.
Yeah, possibly. And it seems that Kieran Scott had quite a poor relationship with Chris Wilder, as he now says that everyone at Middlesbrough is pulling in the right direction. And yeah, you could see that there was a problem earlier on in the season. As you mentioned earlier on in the podcast, Chris, about Wilder appearing on the League of 72's video. I did watch that video, 45 to 50-minute video, alongside David Prutton and 4 other Championship fans, those fans being from Burnley, Blackburn, Watford and Sheffield United. And quite frankly, it was the biggest loving I've ever heard of Burnley and Sheffield United. 45 minutes talking about the fact that they're already promoted and that no one's going to catch them, and that their resources are miles better, and also that Victor Gyökeres is the best player in the Championship, the best player that the Championship's ever seen, ever, because that is Chris Wilder's opinion. But yes, Kieran Scott's interview. Yes, it appears now that he is going to be a bit more sort of fulfilled in his role as head of football, and will have a better relationship with the head coach of Middlesbrough Football Club now that it is Michael Carrick, and hopefully the working relationship between those two and also Neil Bowser and Steve Gibson is all positive, and they all connect well on every front, because that's what we need to have a successful model at this football club. We need everyone to be pulling in the same direction. We need everyone to understand their roles in this hierarchy, and it is not up to the head coach who to sign. I think that it is a club decision who we are going to sign. I don't think we'll sign players without the permission of the head coach or the sort of know-how of the head coach. They will have a say in that, but we will not be signing players anymore off the back of the head coach's view and only his view. So hopefully now that we have got a new manager in place, hopefully he isn't a yes man. I hope that that isn't the case. But what I do hope is that he uses his contacts with places like Manchester United, places like Tottenham Hotspur, and we are able to use his contacts to sign young up-and-coming players, and also players that are ready for the here and now also.
Yeah, well, actually, it's quite a nice transition. And actually, this wasn't planned, but just whilst we're on the topic of incomings, we're not in January just yet, but we have had our first, I guess you could call it, concrete rumour as to who we may be attempting to sign in January. And of course, excuse me, the first player that I am talking about is Dan Barlaser from Rotherham. Deep lying, great passer of the ball, of course. We saw him earlier on in the season at the Riverside, and I thought he was very impressive, kept the ball ticking very well in Rotherham's midfield, has a good set-piece delivery on him, gets around the pitch well, and obviously that looks like it would be a sort of longer-term signing in terms of Johnny Howson, really, because as sad as it is, of course, Johnny Howson can't play football for the rest of his life. But yeah, an interesting name to be linked with, and someone actually that I feel, especially with the management of such a wonderful midfielder during his playing career, I'm sure, not only for midfielders that may sign for the club, but also in terms of, Michael Carrick improving players, it seems, and we've seen what he can do with the likes of Hayden Hackney already. It's an exciting prospect.
It is, and Dan Barlaser has been a fantastic player for Rotherham in the last few years. From the last time they were in the Championship, where I think he was on loan during that time, to last season in League One, where he was among the standout players in League One for Rotherham. And he's continued his form into this season in the Championship, firstly under Paul Warne and now under Smith. Yeah, he's a combative midfielder, 6 foot tall, and what I do think that stands out is he's from this sort of neck of the woods. He's from well, your neck of the woods, Chris, up in Newcastle, and also Michael Carrick's. So I think that looking at that link, you can maybe see why we are being linked to him. If his family perhaps wants to move back up further north to sort of the northeast of England. But yeah, at 25, he's still got his best years ahead of him, and he's already proven to be a decent player at championship level that possibly could even be developed into a top half, top end championship player. So yeah, a nice link to a player so far, the first link of what I think will be quite a busy January for us, looking at reinforcements to this side in a number of key areas. I think we'll be looking at midfielders, and again, I think we'll be looking at forward areas, if I'm honest, to sort of back up what I said earlier about where the goals are going to come from if Juba's goals dry up and if Crooks sort of doesn't pop up as regularly as he has been doing. So I think that those areas we will be looking at in January to strengthen on, whether that be in the short term with loan deals or whether that be in the long term planning for the future. And in this case with Barlaser, I think that that's a name that could be mentioned in the replacement list for Johnny Howson, because as you say, Chris, he's not going to be around at Middlesbrough forever, but as unfortunate as that is, but for the time being, his performances continue to be fantastic, and he's improved as the season's gone on. I think, I can't remember who mentioned this, but someone said that in his time at Middlesbrough, under various managers, Johnny Howson, his performances peak and then gradually get a little bit worse as the manager's about to leave. And then when a new manager comes in, his performances start to progress again.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just sort of weird sort of trend with Johnny House and that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's not one that I thought of actually, but in fairness, just quickly thinking about it now off the top of my head, yeah, that does sound just about right actually. And it just goes to show what a vital part of the team he is. And obviously, as you said earlier on, the partnership that is forming between him and Hayden Hackney is a really enjoyable one to watch. Just finishing up now, actually, in terms of looking ahead and wrapping up the podcast, I guess, actually. It seemed to have flown over being back already. But yeah, we're at that stage where we look ahead to the next fixture, Nathan. And as you also did mention, it is Burnley. There is a connection there with our new member of the coaching staff, Aaron Danks. It's going to be an incredibly difficult game because we take on the league lead as Burnley.
Yeah, it's a game that is probably going to be our biggest test of the season, going away to Turf Moor. It's an absolute dump for a first sort of fact for people. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. But yeah, the ground sort of is exactly the opposite of what their team is at this moment in time, because the ground's an old sort of worn down, horrible place to go, and the team that's on the pitch is probably stylistically one of the best in the championship so far this season. And looking at the table, you can just say that they are the best team in the division at this moment in time. Vincent Kompany, of course, manages Burnley. Glad to see that he got out of Lee Tomlin's pocket after all these years. But yeah, he's doing an incredible job, isn't he? Being linked to a few Premier League sides because of how well he's performed in his early months as Burnley manager and his first job in England as well. But yeah, Burnley are completely the opposite to what everyone knows them as. Everyone will think of Sean Dyche's long ball, 4-4-2, hoof ball, sort of
Gravel for the
anti football way of playing. Whereas now under company, it's very much possession based. Keep the ball, create chances. The front sort of trident of players behind Jay Rodriguez or Ashley Barnes create all sorts of problems for teams. And yeah, it's going to be a very, very difficult test to go there and win, but to go there and get anything as well. They've just come off the back of this afternoon winning 3-0 away at QPR. Okay, QPR are in a bit of a difficult period at this moment in time, having no manager. Okay, they've just appointed Neil Critchley in the past hour or so, I think, as this podcast is being filmed, but we're managerless today. And yeah, Burnley performed quite well this afternoon as well, ran out 3-0 winners. But it's going to be an incredibly difficult game. As I said, probably our most difficult game of the season. We've just got to hope that our players stand up and face the music in what will be a difficult atmosphere as well. I can imagine that ground is going to be booming on Saturday for those players at Burnley. I think it's already a sellout. I know Borough have sold our allocation of 2,250, and I think Turf Moor's a sellout as well, which it's the last game before Christmas. It's a really, really big game. They'll be going into it full of confidence. We'll be going into it full of confidence as well. We'll just have to see. It promises to be a really, really good game of football. But one question that I would ask of you, and I want to see your opinion on this, is with Burnley performing the way they are and being top of the league, and I think they're 8 points.
No game is a free hit in this division, Nathan. I'm putting my foot down. They are a very good football team. And in fairness, even since their first game of the season live on Sky, I was taken away at the transformation that they've undergone under Vincent Kompany. They play, and it feels ridiculous me talking like this about Burnley. And I don't think most football fans will probably ever get used to it for a good couple of years. They play beautiful football, interchangeable in formations and wingers, and as you say, they're sort of attacking front four, possession based. It is genuinely, for a neutral, they're a very good football team to watch, but they are also a championship football club. And yes, of course, they are doing extremely well, but so are we at the moment. And we may go there and they may play us off the park, and it's not out of the question because, as I say, they're a very good football team. But from what I've seen of Middlesbrough of late under Michael Carrick, I don't for 1 minute think that it's not a game where we shouldn't be, going there and thinking, well, we can cause them problems. And yeah, any suggestions of a free hit? I mean, we went to Old Trafford last season and knocked them boys out the cup. We turned over Spurs at the Riverside. Unless we were playing Man City or, one of the real big hitters, I honestly am of the mentality at the moment, probably just with the way that we're performing, because we've sort of peaked a little bit in terms of our season so far. I'll take on anyone, Nathan, and I think that's the attitude that we've got to go there with.
Well, I will be there on Saturday afternoon at Turf Moor, stood on them horrific wooden seats.
Yeah.
And I will be cheering on the boys from that corner of Turf Moor behind the goal. And as the famous quote is from Kevin Keegan, I would love it if we beat them. I would love it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, when we started recording this, I really, really wasn't expecting any quotes from Kevin Keegan to be brought up. But the fact that you've brought that in is absolutely fine with me. And I couldn't agree more, to be honest. Yeah, it is going to be an extremely difficult game, but there's no such thing as a free hit at the moment. I'm not having it, Nathan, and I'm putting my foot down. I might come back to this and completely regret it, but no such thing at the moment. Unless there's anything else to touch on, Nathan, I think that is the first podcast after the break in the championship. Back done, wrapped up, and we're ready to get back into the grueling division that is the Sky Bet Championship.
Yeah, I think it is. Just lastly, up to 12th now in the table. There's no point really looking at the table because it is so tight in the championship. It's not even funny, really. You look at us in comparison to the playoffs, and we're 4 points behind 6th place, which I think at the minute is Preston. When they came off the back of an incredible win yesterday, where Blackburn, who were 3rd, and I think are still 3rd.
Yeah, I think they are, yeah.
Where they've battered them 4-1, and then we're 7 points off the relegation places now, which is beautiful, by the way, considering that we were loitering down that end of the table for quite a long period of time. But it just goes to show what a few wins in the championship can do for you. Before Blackpool, we were still in and around that area thinking, oh, well, if we get beat by Blackpool, imagine how bad that looks at the table.
Yeah.
And now we're glad to be in the top half and looking up rather than well down at like the 1 or 2 teams behind us that were there for the start of the season. So yeah, hopefully things are looking up and Borough can go to Burnley next week and get a result, a positive one. Would be lovely.
It absolutely would, Nathan. So I think all that is left to be said really is as usual, and because we haven't recorded a podcast in a few weeks, I've got to say it. If you have enjoyed watching or listening, whether that be on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you do get your podcasts from, please make sure to subscribe and follow, and of course give us some kind ratings as a Christmas gift to us, Nathan. I hope I'm not asking too much there. I may well be, I'm not sure. But yes, please do be kind on all that sort of stuff. It would be massively appreciated. And finally, Nathan, from me and yourself, that has been the first episode back after the international break of the Boropolis Podcast, and we will see you again next week.